Today we are going to start Unit 1, Lesson 2, which is completely and utterly all review of the ways that we solve equations and inequalities in multiple variables. Okay, so you might want to pause the video and copy all of this down, and then in a minute when you come back, I'll go ahead and start talking about it. Okay, so now that you're back, um, I just want to point out some notes that I added over here on the top right-hand side of the screen. I listed out the YouTube videos from Foundations of Algebra, where I have 3 separate videos teaching these in 3 different lessons, okay? Everything that's on this one half of this paper is covered in 3 separate lessons. Unit 2, Lessons 1 and 2, that is it's solving multi-step equations, but it's broken up into 2 lessons. And then Unit 3, Lesson 1 is all about the inequalities, okay? This right here, what we have is just it's just a very condensed version of last semester's notes, okay? So, our steps for solving multiple step equations and inequalities in blue is what everything is that's the same, okay? So, we always start with distributing. Next, we do combining like terms. And remember, we need to pay attention if the like terms are on the same side of the equal sign, we keep their signs the same. And if they are on different sides of the equal sign, that is when we use our inverse operations or the opposite, okay? Next, we add or subtract our constant term away from the variable term. And then last, for equations, we multiply and divide by the coefficient of the variable term. If we have an inequality in that very last step when we multiply or divide, we need to look for the golden rule. Okay, and over here to the right, I put GR for my abbreviation. The golden rule is when we multiply or divide by a negative number, we need to rotate the inequality. Okay, so let me add that. Rotate the inequality. Okay, and then last is when we have our very final answer. If the variable term is on the right-hand side, like this here, let's say 2 is less than x, then what we would need to do is to flip-flop it. So x and 2 go on opposite sides, and then we also flip the inequality, okay? So this would be the final answer. The variable term must be on the left. Okay, so those are all of our notes. What we're going to do now is look at several examples of both equations and inequalities. Okay, so we are going to do numbers 1 and 2 together, and then you guys are going to try 3 and 4 on your own. Okay, actually, I'm going to do 1 and 2 and 5. And then I'm going to let you guys work with a partner on the rest of them, okay? So the first thing that I like to draw is my gold, or my rose line, okay? And then I'm going to start by first looking for, do I have anything to distribute? The only time that I need to distribute is if I see parentheses. So in number 1, there's no parentheses. Second, I'm going to look for combining like terms, okay? Combining like terms in this problem right here, I see a 9 and an 8. They are both constant terms, and they're on the same side. So I'm going to put them together. So 9 plus 8 is 17. This was a positive 9, and I put it with a positive 8. I kept their original signs the same because they're on the same side. and bring down everything else to keep it lined up. Okay, my next step is to add or subtract the constant. So my constant is a positive 17, so I'm going to do the inverse of that, which is to subtract. Okay, and 11 minus 17 is going to give me a negative 6. And finally, I am going to multiply or divide the coefficient of the variable term. So the coefficient of negative 3x is negative 3, and it's being multiplied, so I'm going to divide. So that simplifies to just give me 1x. Negative 6 divided by negative 3 is a positive 2. And that's my final answer. Okay, let's look at number 2. In number 2, there are no parentheses, so there's nothing to distribute. Next, I look for like terms that I can combine, and I see a negative 7y and a positive 11y, and they are on the same side of the rose line. So I'm going to keep their signs the same. Negative 7 plus 11 is 4, and then keep the y, bring down the plus 9, and bring down the negative 3. Now I'm ready to subtract, because that's the inverse of my constant term, which is minus 9. Those simplify to give me 0. And now I have 4y equals negative 12. My last step is to divide by the coefficient of the variable term on both sides. Remember, coefficient is the number in front. Okay, negative 12 divided by 4 is negative 3. And that's my final answer. Okay, so let's start looking at number 5. The first thing that I want you to do in number 5 is I forgot to type the Z here with the 30. So I want you to put that Z there, okay? And now I'm going to redraw my rose line. Okay, so let's go ahead and start solving number 5. I see some parentheses, so the first thing that I want to do is to distribute the 6 into everything that's inside the parentheses. 6 times 4 is 24z, and then 6 times negative 7 is negative 42. Bring down the equals and bring down the 30z. Okay? My next step is to see if I have any like terms that I can put together. And I do. I see 24z here and 30z over there. Now these terms are on opposite sides of the equation, so to put them together I need to use the inverse operation. So let's move the 24. This is a positive 24, so I need to subtract it from both sides. Subtract it. Okay. And so that reduces to 0. Bring down the negative 42. 30 minus 24 is 6z. Okay, and then my last step here is to divide by the coefficient of the variable term, which is 6 and 6. So I get z equals negative 42 divided by 6 is a negative 7. All right, so we've done numbers 1, 2, and 5 together. What I would like for you to do is you can work either independently or with your partner or whatever your teacher decides. And I want you to complete numbers 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay? So go ahead and pause this video and work with your partner. And I'm going to go ahead and leave my examples up here while you pause. All right, these are my solutions to numbers 3, 4, and 6. Go ahead, pause this video if you need to. Check your work with mine. If there's anything that you cannot figure out or any questions that you have, raise your hand and I will come and try to help you with it, or I might even do it with the whole class, okay? So pause the video while you take a look at these. All right, so here are my solutions to 7, 8, and 9. Again, you might want to pause the video and take a few minutes and look through my work. And compare it with your own. And if you have any questions on these 3 problems, raise your hand. Alrighty, so now what we're going to do is we are going to come look at the solving inequalities review, okay? The very first inequality that we solve is just going to be a regular old solve the inequality, okay? So let's draw our rose line just like before. Okay, there's no parentheses, so I don't need to distribute anything. Next, I'm going to start looking for like terms. So I see negative 15c and a positive 2c. So I want to go ahead and combine those. They're on opposite sides, so I need to use the opposite sign. So let's go ahead and move this 2c to the left. 2c, all right. So 152, negative 28, and then negative 15 minus 2 is negative 17c. Next, I need to move the constant term away from the variable term, and I need to use the inverse operation of that. So I'm going to add 28, bring down this negative 17c. Okay, and 152 plus 28 is 180. My next step is to divide everything by the coefficient of c, which is negative 17. Negative 17. Okay, so 180 divided by negative 17, it's going to give me a decimal. So negative 10 and a half. Or you could have written 0.5, that's okay. And then there's the C that I brought down. Now, because this is an inequality, the very last step says look for the golden rule or for flip-flop. So the first thing I'm going to do is look for the golden rule, which is right here in my very last step. Okay, I divided by a negative number, which means that when I bring down this inequality, I need to flip it over. Okay, now I can look for flip-flop, and I see that the C variable is already on the left-hand side, so I'm okay. So just a golden rule there. Okay, now if I scroll down here just a little bit more, I need to graph this. Okay, so C is less than negative 10 and a half. Negative 10 and a half is right here after the 10. Okay. Now there is no line underneath the inequality, so this will be an open circle. And remember that that is pointing to the left if I turned that into an arrow. So this will be pointing to the left, and that's how I shade. All right, great job. What I would like for you and your partner to do is to work on numbers 2, 3, and 4 with the inequalities, and I want you to practice solving the inequalities and graphing them. I'm going to leave my example up on the board while you work on yours. All right, here is my work for number two, as well as my graph. Just a reminder that if there is a line underneath the inequality, I need to have a solid dot. Okay, and again, it is pointing to the left, so that's the way that I needed to draw my arrow. And so here is my work and my graphs for numbers 3 and 4. In number 3, I had to apply the golden rule because I divided by a -2, which flipped my inequality and made it a less than sign. In number 4, I had chosen to move the 7 over to the right, which meant that in my last step I had to do flip-flop to get the x value back onto the left side of the inequality. Okay, and so that made it x is greater than or equal to 38. Any questions that we have, I know that we're going to talk about them as a class, so please be certain to raise your hand and ask, or even call me over individually, okay? Now, one last thing that I do want to say that I probably should have said at the beginning of the lesson is really a reminder. So look at my answers. I have 8.5, -10.5. Over here, I had answers that were um, number 3 here is -1/2. Number 4 is 1/3. Number 7 was 3/2. Number 9 was 1/4. Okay. So sometimes when students get an answer that's a fraction, they automatically assume that they've done something wrong. And that's just not always the case. Remember, fractions are numbers too. And so it is possible that you did everything perfectly and that the answer is actually just a fraction. Okay? All right. What I'd like for you to do now is to go ahead and do your practice assignment that's posted to Google Classroom.